use a trim tool or a screwdriver, but I like to use the trim tool. That way I can just go like that. So that's what that tag does. That pin goes down in. If you have a clip like this, I use this kind of body tool, and then you just grab both sides, squeeze, and you can pull the tag right up. To drain the coolant, we're going to take this little flap door down, just a Phillips screwdriver, take this little plastic screw out, and then we can access the drain plug for the radiator. It's on the driver's side. Fold that back. Get a catch pan ready. Remove the 2 support brackets. And this is going to be a 12mm socket. Take this clamp off this hose. It's part of the burping hose. You can loosen up your pliers so that they grab but they don't tear, and just twist till the rubber breaks free. And then you can just pop it right off. This hose goes to the overflow tank. So now with a pair of needle nose or a trim tool, you've got to take all these clips off that hold the harness into the electric cooling fan assembly. There we go. Now once you have them undone, you can undo the connectors. And that's just going to push down on these tabs and pull. There we go. Same on the black connector. And I'm going to take my harness, pull it up out of the way. Now we're going to remove the hose clamp down there on that hose, driver's side. Now remove that hose. Now on the passenger side, you're going to lower this lower radiator hose clamp and remove the hose. So the last thing we're going to do is hopefully take off this upper radiator support. So I'm going to remove the battery hold down, 10mm socket, push that aside, and then I have these coolant tube brackets, 10mm socket also, and then a 12mm socket is going to take the last 4 bolts out. Just take this coolant tube thing and move it aside. Might have to kind of manipulate it under the hood latch cable. Lift this up. Now we're just going to set it aside safely. Now with all this out, we can hopefully pull the whole unit right up. You've got to make sure that you take the AC condenser and set that aside. Now this whole unit should come up as one piece. With a 12mm socket, you have 2 mounting bolts down the bottom part of this radiator fan shroud that goes to the radiator. Remove those. Now you should be able to pop the fan right off the radiator. Now we're going to install our new fan motor shroud, identifying the bottom and the bottom. That's where those bolts are going to go in to the bottom of the radiator. Just put it over like that. Lift your radiator up. And then line up the threaded bolt. I'm going to put both in by hand first before I tighten. And then I'm going to snug it up with a 12mm socket. Now we want to make sure that the petcock is tight. Now we're ready to install. Now before you put your assembly back in, make sure that the rubber bushings are still in place on both sides. That's really important. They need to be in there. And now just try to gently guide your assembly in, watching out for all sorts of brackets like that battery tray hold down. And then I'm going to lift up my condenser and put that on the tray before I put the tray in place. Tilt the AC condenser up as far as you can this way. That way you can lift the radiator shroud into it, because other than that, this condenser does not want to work with you. And that way you can line up the holes that it goes in like that. Now we can move the whole radiator freely into its mounting holes. So when we're at this point, before you attach the top assembly, I strongly recommend putting the hoses back on, because now you have all this free room for your arms. Make sure that the hose is bottomed out right on the ridge of the radiator. Try to line the clamp up the way it was before you release it. Put your hose clamp, I suggest, at the very end of the hose where it belongs. Then feed it over the radiator. Make sure it bottoms out. Try to position that clamp the way it was, and then release it. I'm going to install the overflow tank hose, because once again it's easy to get to now. So now we're going to take the top of our radiator shroud, the plastic, I'm going to line up the AC condenser, and I'm going to clip it in straight across with these tabs. Now we're going to take our mounting bolts, thread it in by hand, and then 12mm socket, tighten it down. Do the same to the other side. Now we can install our crossover crossover support. There's one. Remember, this goes under the hood cable. 2 on the driver's and then 2 on the passenger side. This is a 12mm socket. So now we can put on the 2 brackets for that bypass tube, and then you have the one for the battery hold down. Now we can connect our wiring harness to the electric fans. I like to connect them first before I pop the harnesses back in the slots. That's clicked. Now we see pretty much it wants to go right where it belongs, right in these mounting. Now we're going to mount our radiator supports. As you can see, the hook is going to go right up in that slot, so don't, you can actually cross it, it doesn't matter, they're both identical. And get our 12mm socket. Just give them a good tightening. Now we can install the upper decorative cover and start from this side, and you can work your way over with the pins. So I'm going to put my 2 push pins like this, one there, and then one here, and then I'll put the rest of my pins in all the way around. Now we're going to just take the cover off and add coolant to the system. Look up your manufacturer's specs for the ratio of coolant strength